Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jesus told us that we should pray for those in authority, so let's do that now. Father God, we ask your blessing on this meeting. We ask your blessing on all of the people here, officers, members of the public. We ask you guide our discussions, our considerations and our thoughts. And we ask that you will create in us all a desire to work together for the good of all of the residents of this borough. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I'll get my glasses, organised, and a pen. Okay. Okay, just before we start the business of the meeting, I've just got one announcement to make. Some of you may be aware that Councillor Ken Woodhead is currently in hospital, having had a major operation on Monday. I'm sure you'll all want to join me in sending our best wishes for a speedy recovery. As soon as he's able to accept visitors, I'll send him a card and some chocolates. He'd probably prefer a packet of fags, but he's not allowed them while he's in hospital. But he'll have to make do with the chocolates till he gets out. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, we'll start our business. So first of all, are there any apologies for absence? Oh yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Elizabeth Williamson.
Thank you. Yeah.
Apologies from Ellie Winfield. She's got a family emergency and somebody's actually.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have three apologies from our members. Councillor Olivia Ball, Councillor Hannah Crosby and Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, we'll now move on to the next agenda item, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, I'm not seeing anybody. Thank you. Okay, so... Right.
A clarification from the monitoring officer, if possible, that some of us in this room actually took place in a very similar debate last week at County Hall, and of course we voted one way or another. So I'm presuming that that doesn't matter with regards to this evening.
That's the legal officer.
Thank you, Mayor. The guidance that's attached to the pack, it does set out considerations for members. One of those considerations of whether you consider yourself to be predetermined, if you've made a decision elsewhere, and whether your mind has been made up, whether you're able to fully consider the debate and report in making your decision today. Ultimately, it is a matter for each member here that may have sat at an alternative council which has considered this report before to determine whether they do consider themselves to be predetermined. If you do, then it's a matter for you to declare that at the intersection, not take part in the debate or vote, and to leave the room.
Thank you. Okay, that's cleared that up. Okay, so we'll move on to item 3, local government reform. Sorry,
I just wasn't sure whether I should make sure that the Ken's absence is recorded as well.
yes, was that not recorded? Oh,
We noted that he wasn't here, but not apologies.
yeah, it just needs to be noted, don't it? Yeah, thank you, yeah. Okay, so before I open the item for debate, I would like to highlight recommendation 2 on page 11. Rather than say resolve, this should state recommend, as this is also a recommendation to Cabinet. Okay. Therefore, recommendation 2 should read, recommend to Cabinet that the impact assessment report as set out in Appendix D be submitted to the Secretary of State by Broxlow Borough Council as part of this process. Okay, so in order to open the... Councillor Vadulovic.
So, Mr Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to begin tonight's debate by stating clearly that I have no opposition whatsoever to local government review. I have campaigned endlessly in my political career for a full appraisal of a needs-based assessment around the delivery of services, particularly those less fortunate than ourselves. We are servants of the people and the public, and Mr Mayor, like all members, I take my responsibilities extremely seriously. And so on tonight's debate, I wish to start off by saying that I do believe that as part of a fairer funding review, local government should look at reorganising, should look at services, should look at the way future funding profiles are set to work. That has not been the case. Previous government abrogated its responsibility for 5 years on the fairer funding review. So far we've only had 1 year's lapse in this government, but fairer funding review is both necessary and vital to ensure public service delivery for the next generation. But Mr Mayor, and thank you for your introduction, I would like to provide an overview of the position regarding local government reorganisation in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire ahead of final proposals being submitted to government later this week. In February 2025, the government formally invited all 9 areas across council areas across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, that included Nottingham City, Nottinghamshire County Council and district councils, to bring forward proposals for restructuring local government into a unitary model. This invitation aimed to create a simpler, more efficient system of local governance through a move to single-tier authorities. Following the invitation in March 2025, this council submitted an interim plan confirming its intention to work collaboratively with other councils on 3 potential options. These became known as options 1B, option 1E and option 2. Members will be aware that option 2 was subsequently discounted as it did not meet the government's population criteria and requirements. It would have retained Nottingham City Council as it is and created a second unitary authority for the rest of Nottinghamshire, which the government indicated would not be viable in their feedback on the interim plan. And as work progressed, 2 proposals continued to be developed jointly by partners. However, Nottingham City Council later announced a 3rd option, centred around expanding the city boundaries. This model, referred to as option 1-2B, has been developed independently by the City Council, with the proposal being recently republished, so we can see that they are looking to take in parts of Broxtowe, Gedling and Rushcliffe. So, Mr Mayor, let me briefly summarise the proposals as they currently stand. Option 1B would create 2 new unitary authorities. Within the report proposal on page 143, it suggests that the proposal will look to utilise a continuing status to manage its implementation. And I want to stress the word continuing. The Rushcliffe Borough Council report to full council on the 20th of November 2025 proposes the County Council and the City Council, as they cover the 4 geographical area, as the continuing authorities. The details of the authority makeup is of this. 1 combining the current area of Broxtowe, Gedling and Nottingham City. The 2nd form the remaining Nottinghamshire authorities, including the County Council, and this option is supported by Nottinghamshire County Council and Rushcliffe Borough Council. Mr Mayor, option 1E also proposes 2 new authorities, but with a different configuration. 1 combining Broxtowe, Rushcliffe and Nottingham City, and the 2nd being made up of the remaining districts and the County Council, This option is supported by Bassett Law, Gedling, Newark and Sherwood and Mansfield. And finally, option 1B2, as I call it, put forward by Nottingham City Council, proposes an expanded city boundary with 2 new authorities. One unitary council covering the existing Nottingham City, parts of Broxtowe, Rushcliffe and Gedling. A second unitary covering the district areas of Ashfield, Mansfield, Bassett Law, Gedling, Newark and Sherwood and the remaining parts of Broxtowe, Rushcliffe and Gedling. And this option is supported by Nottingham City, as we saw this week, the 3 Nottingham MPs as well. Alongside this technical works and significant engagement has taken place. Between the 4th of August and the 14th of September 2025, 2 consultation exercises were undertaken. A county-wide survey, 11,483 responses across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, but also in addition, Broxtowe Borough Council carried out its own borough-wide survey issued to every household, generating 12,507 responses. This survey asked residents 3 key questions about the future and shape of local government, and the results have been shared with all members previously. But tonight, I will state again, support of option 1B was 10%, support of option 1E was 19%, no support for either was 71%. Option 1B2 was not consulted on with Broxtowe residents as there was not enough development on the proposal at that time. We also held 2 public events on the 27th of August in Beeston and on the 4th of September in Eastwood. These sessions enabled residents to ask questions and share their views directly with officers and councillors. Members will recall that at our meeting on the 15th of October an urgent motion was passed. The motion resolved 3 actions. First, to register this council's objection to any proposal would see Broxtowe divided. Second, to write to Nottingham City Council and the Secretary of State, setting out our concerns that an expanded city model was being advanced without appropriate due process or a robust cost assessment. And third, to write to the Members of Parliament covering Broxtowe, requesting their support in raising objections regarding the expanded city model. Mr Mayor, we now approach the next key milestone. The final proposal must be circulated to government by the 28th of November 2025. These documents have been circulated to all members and made publicly available on the Council's website. Once submitted, the government will review the proposals. It is proposed that in early 2026 there will be a period of statutory consultation and a final decision expected in summer 2026. If a proposal is approved, a shadow authority will be elected in May 2027, with the new unitary arrangements coming into effect in April 2028. So Mr Mayor, I will rest at this point and allow members to state clearly their views. The public have heard their views very carefully. A consultation is exactly what it said on the tin. We said it was a consultation, and therefore I will abide by the results of that consultation as a sovereign representative of this council in all the discussions that we've had on local authority reorganisation. So, Mr Mayor, the recommendations tonight are set up on you into recommendations 2, and first one it reads to recommend to Council to Cabinet for consideration at the meeting tomorrow night actually on whether to accept or reject proposals 1B, 1E and 1B2 Nottingham City expanded boundaries as Broxtowe Borough Council's preferred option. Mr Mayor, I wish to state for the record tonight that I intend to call for a recorded vote on each of those options to be voted on individually. I will call therefore for option 1B, a recorded vote. I will call for option 1E, a recorded vote, and a recorded vote on the City Council's expanded view. So tomorrow night's Cabinet meeting, as the executive body of this council, when making that decision, will act upon the recommendations from tonight's council.
Thank you, Councillor Radulovic. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, we've had a call for a vote. Do we need to do that now? Call for a call. Yeah.
Well, we could go into the debate and then.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll do the recorded vote later. We'll open up the debate. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Carr.
I'll kick it off.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen. It's a sad day that we've actually got to this point, because all over the country, people in authorities are not really very happy about what's happening. Our particular case is slightly different. It involves some authorities joining Nottingham City, and that is why people are so concerned, because we've seen the headlines over the last few years, we've seen the figures, they've still got commissioners in place, and people in this borough are saying, hang on a minute, is this being done just to sort out the financial problems of the city? Is it that, or is it really service delivery? It isn't service delivery, it's financially led, very much so. I think it should be noted, the position of the people that now run the County Council, Reform UK Limited, who before the county elections were actively campaigning against local government reorganisation, but as soon as they took office, they were suddenly in favour of local government reorganisation. They're very much for the north-south split, and there are political reasons for that. It's going to cause all sorts of problems for the north of the borough, because the county, because the north of the county is the areas that have got most of the social problems, and poor old Newark and Sherwood district are going to be the cash cows for that, very much so. But nobody's actually bothered with that. I'm now actually coming to the conclusion that if we'd have done anything, we should have actually gone for the whole county option, which has been on the table before, if we're going to be made to do something. But that option isn't on the table as we stand at the moment. So it ought to be remembered that when the county council are saying we're in fact, it's a good idea, that's not what they were saying before they were elected. And I think that is disingenuous, to say the least. They, of course, went at the same time as our consultation went out, the whole county consultation went out, and they got far less responses than we did here in Broxtowe to ours. Immediately, when eventually the result was released, and there was some doubt whether that result was going to be released, immediately Councillor Barton, the new leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, poo-pooed it. It's all the idea of Labour in Bassett Law, apparently, which was rubbish. He had nothing to do with the consultation, despite chairing the meeting that actually came up with the consultation wording. He poo-pooed it. Now, again, because it didn't give the answer that he wanted to hear. But we have clear evidence, Mr Mayor, that the people of Broxtowe do not want local government reorganisation as it stands at the moment, and I think that's what we ought to be concentrating minds on. Alex Norris, MP for Kimberley and Nottingham North, on East Midlands politics, actually said, we won't do anything that the people don't want. Well, we don't want it, Mr Norris. So stand by your words, listen to the people of Broxtowe, and think again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Mee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on an issue that will shape the future of both our city and our county local government reorganisation. For many residents, a lot of them either don't know what it is or haven't been involved. Only around 22% of residents actually filled in the Broxtowe response and consultation. So it's clear many people either don't understand it or aren't interested. The idea is simple: reorganising councils so the services people rely on every day are delivered in a more efficient, more coordinated and more accountable way. At the moment, Broxtowe Borough Council handles only a very small portion of the decisions that affect people locally. Most major services, the ones residents contact me about most often, are delivered by Nottinghamshire County Council. Under the proposals, the County Council, the District Councils, Broxtowe included, and Nottingham City Council would all be abolished and replaced by 2 new unitary authorities. That change, what those authorities should be and how they should be shaped, is what we're supposed to be deciding in this meeting. Broxtowe consulted on 2 of the options, as well as their own no option. Option 1B, as has been stated, Nottingham, Broxtowe, Gedling as a new unitary authority, and option 1E, Nottingham, Broxtowe and Rushcliffe as a new unitary authority. After looking carefully at both, I'm supporting option 1B. It's stronger geographically and it aligns better with existing travel patterns, economic links and shared infrastructure. And it positions us alongside communities that naturally look towards Nottingham as their centre for employment, education, business and transport. For Kimberley residents, the people I represent, this option offers the best chance of access to growth, investment and jobs. Now, it's important to look honestly at the alternatives proposed in this chamber. Let's start with the Conservative proposal, a single unitary covering all of Nottinghamshire, excluding the city. In practice, this means excluding the economic engine of our area, the city that drives growth, investment and opportunity. Instead, they wanted to place Broxtowe in a unitary authority with Worksop and Retford, but not Nottingham. So the proposal was to tie us to towns miles away in the north, with very different economies and very different priorities. While cutting us off from the city, our residents actually often rely on for jobs, education, transport and business. Critically, the Conservatives themselves have had 8 years to deliver this idea. They've held government power, they held the county, they held this council at one point, and they've had seats across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. Yet after all that time and political control, nothing happened. The idea appears nowhere in this report as it was deemed unviable by the government. Then we have the so-called alternative from the ruling alliance. And in truth, it's not an alternative at all, because they haven't put one forward. Not a single option, not a single preference. Nothing to indicate how they believe the future of local government should look. We all know that reorganisation is coming. The government will proceed with it. And if we do not put forward a clear, considered option, the government will choose for us. That is not leadership, it's not responsibility, and it's not someone looking out for the right decision. Other councils have at least taken part in the process. Rushcliffe submitted something. I didn't agree with it, but they put something forward. Even Huntingdonshire put forward a proposal for a unitary model in their area. Broxtowe had the same opportunity, and Steve just said he would have supported a different option, but they put nothing forward, no plan, no alternative, no attempt to lead. This brings me to a broader point. The way some people here talk about Broxtowe, they think it's an ancient county with thousands of years of shared identity. It isn't. It was created in the 1970s, an administrative drawing together of towns that are distinct in character and priority. And the consultation makes it clear that most residents don't describe themselves as being from Broxtowe. They say they're from Kimberley, Beeston, Eastwood, Stapleford, near Nottingham, or Nottingham. In fact, more people seem to say they live near IKEA than they did say they lived in Broxtowe. And that's quite, yeah. And ironically, the place called Broxtowe isn't even in Broxtowe. It's in Nottingham. So when some councillors talk about Broxtowe as if it's some historic identity, it just doesn't match reality. Another concern that people raise is that fear of a Nottingham Broxtowe Gedling authority will be dominated by the city. But the city isn't just one uniform block. Bulwell, Clifton, Sherwood and the city centre all have different needs, just as our own towns do. And in many ways, communities like Kimberley or Beeston often have more in common with other places than they do with each other. What matters is the representation that's available, and every area will still elect its own councillors who will focus on the needs of their communities and have 100% power over the local services that they deliver. This brings us to the us versus them arguments that some councillors in this chamber have been pushing. The idea that the city somehow is fundamentally different and can't be trusted. They're not like us, they don't own cars. It's a divisive, fear-based argument, and it has no grounding in how local government works. In fact, it's anything but progressive. The Alliance calls itself progressive, yet this rhetoric's classic grievance politics, playing on people's fears, imagining the worst, and predicting disaster without any evidence. That is not progressive politics, it's reactionary. Look at North Yorkshire. They've reorganised into a single unitary, and people in Harrogate still say they live in Harrogate. People in Selby still say they live in Selby. Local identities do not disappear because of administrative reform. Communities remain communities. What changes is who is responsible for delivering those services, not who people are. The most important point, though, is what this change means for residents. Yes, it creates financial savings, but more importantly, it brings all services under one roof, with one team responsible and one place where decisions are made. The consultation clearly showed that the services residents most want improved are the ones currently split between district and county responsibilities, and the services they say are working the best are the ones which are run either by the district or the county alone. This confirms what many of us already know. The two-tier system's outdated and confusing, delays action, frustrates residents and prevents us from getting what people expect. I can't tell you how many times residents come to me about potholes on Main Street or parking issues on Truman Street. I pass them on, I chase them, I try and get them done, but nothing often happens. Reform didn't fix it and neither did the Tories. But the structure itself doesn't work. A single authority means clear responsibility. No more passing the buck between councils, and residents will know exactly who to contact, and that council will have the power to act. The options we have are imperfect, but because the administration put forward absolutely nothing, we are left with the options others have submitted. Of those options, 1B offers the strongest future for Kimberley, for Broxtowe, and for the wider Nottingham area. It gives us a structure that matches how people actually live, travel, work, and identify. That's why I'm supporting option 1B, because it gives our communities the best chance to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mee. Anybody else wish to speak? No, Councillor McCall first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Couch. Thank you.
Thank you. I might not agree with everyone when they're speaking here, but Will does speak very well, and so thank you for your speech. But I'm sorry I can't agree with it, but I do like you. No, you're a good person. I just want to say we've been given a list, haven't we? Everyone's got this, haven't they? With lots of groups and organisations on there, and I'm part of two of them groups. Whether I need to declare it, it's just we're not voting on anything on them groups individually, are we? But we're lucky in Broxtowe. We've got so many groups and organisations, and there's a list here with some of them on, or ones that's been funded with grant awards, it says at the top. And there's many councillors that either support, because we're not all just councillors here, there's lots of councillors that are part of these groups and organisations all over Broxtowe. And these groups and organisations, it's the list here, they help thousands of people all over Broxtowe, and they can only do that because they're relying from funding from here. And when I've seen what's happened, because there's groups in the city and other areas like that, they're always getting the funding cut. They're being closed down. You've got places like the Marcus Garvey Centre got shut down. You've got the Kaya Development Project in St Anne's, right in the heart of St Anne's, got shut down. And then you see all these incidents that's happening in the city. I mentioned it in a previous meeting. Youngsters up on the roofs of empty buildings in the city. There's sadly the incident the other week with the machetes and that. These people being stabbed and that in the city and that. And a lot of it is because the youngsters have got nothing to do. And they've got nothing to do because all the funding's been cut from these groups and organisations. We don't do that in Broxtowe. We've supported these groups and organisations, and we've got people out there getting into trouble. Of course we have. But we're able to work with them. We did Operation Potassium a few years ago, where we all worked with different groups and it's still going, isn't it? That at the time, it saw a 33% reduction in antisocial behaviour. That's got a massive value. So the little bits of funding that this council gives to these groups and organisations, it's worth a lot more than the thousands of pounds or sometimes the few £100s that we give to the groups, because they all stretch it and make it work, and they're helping thousands of people. I've looked at this list on here, my community groups on here, and there's 19 groups on here that we work with. So it shows that everyone works together, and that does worry me. One of the other things that worries me is the lack of youth clubs in other areas. And I know it's not something that Broxtowe do, it's the county, isn't it? But we all work together and support them. And then you go in the city and they haven't got any because the county council don't fund them. So the groups and organisations that's working with the youngsters, and I say the youngsters a lot because that's who I do a lot of my stuff with, they're all supported through councils like this, and it's scary, and it scares a lot of these groups that they could end up shutting down because they don't get any funding. Because the attitude is, well, why should we fund something over in, I'll say Stapleford or something like that, when we're not funding it in St Anne's? And to me, you should be opening more youth clubs and we should be funding more groups and organisations. So that's quite scary, that. And the other thing is, you can say whether lots of people took part in the consultation or they didn't. People can spin figures however they want. You can win an election if one person votes for you. They don't go, oh, not enough people voted for you, so we'll ignore that, because it doesn't work like that. So the amount of people that's responded to the consultation, the majority of them have said no, they don't want this. I've always sat in council meetings and listened to what the residents said and voted what they've said. Even in the back of my mind, I might have thought something's a good idea. I'm not there for what I want, otherwise it's pointless being a councillor. And then before I finish speaking, I'd just like to say thank you to all the staff, because they've had to do all this, they've had to do all the work, all these meetings and that, and putting facts and figures together and attend meetings for something that could end up them losing their jobs if this doesn't exist anymore. And they've done it in a professional manner, like they always do. So I just wanted to say thank you to all the staff, because they do a cracking job. I wouldn't like someone to say to me, go and put a report together, you could end up shutting your community group down at the end of it. And I wouldn't expect anything different from our staff. So I just want to end saying thank you to all the staff that's been involved in this, because it's got to be really difficult for you all, and you all do a cracking job, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McRae. Councillor Couch.
Thank you. I regret to say I was around in the 1970s when the first local government reorganisation was done. And I was reading a degree in geography, and the Maud report said that it had been fundamentally wrong because it had introduced a third tier into local government. And they said that it was going to be extremely costly. So I do understand why the government wants to reorganise local government. In reading all these documents, there seemed to me to be two main aims. One was to create an East Midlands metropolitan area, and therefore the geography of the decisions that are made here are going to be very important, because we are going to have to fit in with South Derbyshire. The second main aim was taking on board what the Maud report said, is that they've got to streamline the operation because it's costing too much money. And nowhere in the report does it mention the introduction of Agent AI, but I think that is probably Microsoft AI, what the government is intending, because that is the thing that is actually going to save a lot of money. And whilst one can talk about ideology, I feel that we have to be fiscally responsible. And one of the things that really worries me, especially since I've listened to the budget today, and that taxation for the majority of us is going to increase, I am worried that as I've read it in summary, it is going to result in spending £25 million for a defined benefit of 30% by 2031, which basically means a 5% benefit per year for a unitary authority. It does mean that we have to face that the city is 645 million roughly in debt, and that means if we go into the city, that given the fact also that Broxtowe is £7.2 million in debt with declining reserves, the question is who is going to pay for it? And the issue for me anyway is, because I'm in Band E, that I'm going to face a 7.5% rise in my council tax on top of the tax that I'm already going to have from the announcements today. So I am worried about that. The other issue I'd like to take up with the gentleman here, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. But one of the issues with B1 is that it doesn't fulfill the main aim of what doing this represents, and that is to have the Trent Arc development area. because it's in the wrong area, and it will transcend a number of authorities, and it would make that growth zone very difficult to achieve. And it could, in my opinion, actually be achieved with an arc of development along the A52 towards Derby, on the Derby-Nottingham axis, which will lead into South Derbyshire. And it also could be achieved possibly with the development along the A52 eastwards. But it is principally the cost of doing this and who is going to end up paying for it. I represent Nuttall, and if you look at the population statistics, the population of Nuttall is demographically ageing faster than the national average. So I would like to ask, are we expecting those people where in Nuttall the house ownership, if you look at the population census data, is higher than the national average? Are we expecting those older people, including me, to pay for that degree of rise in council tax? So I feel that we really have to question whether we can take on board some of these options at all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Couch. Go to Councillor Watts next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I've been absolutely struck by the contrast. We had Councillor McRae. How will this affect the residents and the people that we serve? And then we had the Conservatives. How will it affect me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's an awful lot demonstrated in those last two speeches. Well, Mr. Mayor, I would love to be able to support something on this agenda, but what we have here are options that all will negatively affect our communities, the people that we serve. Option 1B and option 1E give the residents of Broxtowe exactly the same. We're dumped into the city, and the residents of Broxtowe have spoken very loudly to say we do not want to go into the city. I hope that Alex Norris is listening to what his residents say, although his comments in the Nottingham Post yesterday suggest that he's not. How is it going to affect our residents and the service that they get if we go into a unitary city? I come from North Yorkshire. My mother and my sister still live in North Yorkshire. They were forced into a unitary relatively recently. One thing has become abundantly clear since then. The quality of service has gone downhill massively. Yes, I only have one person to complain to because the council have dug up the road outside my mum's drive and she can't get a car out. But that hole's been there now for 8 weeks and they've done nothing about it. And every time my mum wants to come out of her house, 2 workmen have to lay down a couple of bits of chipboard so she can drive over it. And when she comes back, the chipboard comes out again. It is appalling. That's what's going to be happening here. The City Council basically told us that. On the 14th of October, a gentleman by the name of Jay Hayes, who is the Executive Member for Housing and Planning and the Councillor for Bestwood, wrote to all the members of the Planning Committee on Broxtowe basically to tell us that the reason that we care about enforcement cases and following up issues and planning breaches is because we have nothing better to do. Whereas, in his words, for a district council, it's not unusual, as planning is probably the most important thing the authority have responsibility for. It's very different for a councillor in a large city unitary in terms of the breadth and complexity of constituent and ward issues, given the additional areas of service. In other words, if we go into the city, we're just not going to be able to do things the same way that we are, because we'll be too busy dealing with all the rest of the rubbish. In the 1970s, when local government reform came out in 1974, when the bill was passed, I was 6. So I can't claim that I was a constitutional expert at the age of 6. But I did actually write my dissertation for my degree on that act, because in the 1980s it was still relatively recent. And the reforms that we had then were based on research, white papers, consideration. The reforms that we have now were written on the back of Angela Rayner's mortgage document. They are frankly appalling. The current government have launched an attack on people's right to protest. They've launched an attack yesterday on the right to trial by jury, and they've launched an attack on democracy with this. I hope very much that this council will send a very clear message to the government. They are on the wrong track. They can still change, they can still turn round, they can still listen, but they'll need to start doing that soon. I can't support any of these proposals because they are fundamentally wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Cullen.
Can I just come back on that comment?
Sorry. No, Councillor Cullen. Yep.
Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, members of the public, Ethan. He's my friend, he watches me at every meeting. I have been discussing this and hearing about this and looking at this for such a long time now. So is there anything left to say? Let me say this. Another project I work on is an international project that I'm always banging on again about, the Sea Cities project. It's a project of international cooperation between 5 cities across Europe. And it took 3 years. It took 3 years for 5 cities to figure out how they could work together. And for 5 years, so now 8 years, we've been working on it. And I can tell you, Broxtowe is on the map. In 5 cities in Europe, they know all about Broxtowe now. They knew nothing, very little about Broxtowe before, but it's taken 8 years. Now, let me say this. In February this year, when we were just getting over Christmas and still eating the last of our sweets, the government formally invited us to shake everything up and change everything. And we weren't expecting it. It was not in their manifesto. It was news to us. And, you know, they'll say it was in the manifesto. If it was in the manifesto, it was in disguised language that didn't make us notice it. And in March this year, just 1 month later, we had to say what we thought and what we would do about this. And in May this year, there was an election to the county council. And Reform did quite well. So did I, to be fair. Reform campaigned on saying that they wouldn't have any part of this. They didn't agree with it. So did I, to be fair. But Reform won control of the county. And straight away, they realised they would have some part of this. Now, many of the Reform councillors at County Hall were formerly Conservatives. Still are, in my view. and then you wouldn't want them back. Truly, you wouldn't want them back. No. Just like, to be fair, Labour don't want me back either, although they do keep inviting me.
We've not even sent out any invitations to
So, at the county council, so then, you know, they wanted a submission. It took 8 years for 5 cities to agree on something, but our government wants, in the space of less than 1 year, when we are busy doing our jobs anyway, and they don't want us not to be busy doing our jobs, they want us to come up with a proposal. They want us to agree to a proposal and propose something that will fundamentally change local government going forward in this area. And it's happening in other parts of the country as well. And it's happening in Derbyshire. And what we know is that once we put forward this proposal that we've had to come up with in a few short months, if we did come up with one, the government will then decide which of the various proposals that are proposed that they'll take forward. And they've already said Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire will have to match. Well, Derbyshire are busily coming up with other proposals at the moment. So we are being asked, and do you know what? Different authorities paid a fortune to consultants to come up with these options. And none of the options are good for Broxtowe. But we didn't waste our money on a consultant. Maybe we should have. Maybe we should have paid a fortune of our taxpayers' money on a consultant that came up with an option that was best for Broxtowe. Reform, and the Conservatives who were formerly Reform, and you know, they're all a bit similar, they came up with an option. They came up with an option that was good for the Reform areas of the county and the Conservative areas of the county. Rushcliffe played a blinder. They knew that they could deal with Reform because they're mates of old. So they kept themselves out of the city by coming up with 1B. And Councillor Will Mee over here, who's actually a Labour councillor, supports the option developed by Reform and the Conservatives.
You support the Tories, so it's not really much different, is it? You support the Gedling Tories.
I don't support the Gedling Tories one bit.
We vote with them, so if that's the same logic you use.
Mr Mayor, can you stop this?
I say, we could all say, maybe local government reorganisation is needed. But if it is needed, we need time to consider it properly. We are not saying we don't support this. We are saying you are rushing us into it. We're being forced into a marriage without we even know the names of the people we're marrying. We're not having it. I think we have to be clear. I've been thinking a lot. This last couple of weeks, I've been thinking a lot about red lines. Red lines for all sorts of reasons, about things that are just simply wrong. And let me tell you, this Labour government has had me thinking that. So many things that are just simply wrong. And I know if I supported any of the options on the table here, not only do I know for sure, because we in Broxtowe did a consultation that got the largest response of any consultation we've ever done in our short history. You know, and I was about 10, I think, when Broxtowe became a borough. Might have been a bit older. I might be lying there. A bit older. I wasn't old enough to care. We know that the people of Broxtowe, not that they don't want reorganisation, but they don't like these options that we're being forced into. So if we were to vote on one of these options tonight, and I believe this in my bones, and I've thought about it such a lot, I would be compromising what I think is the right thing to do. And I know that when these options get to the government, they will choose the option that they like best, and they will pretend that they let us all have a say. But they'll decide. And they've already said that it'll have to match with Derbyshire. So it's all a nonsense. And it's all being rushed through. And it needs to be stopped now. And we need to say, We will do this, but we need a longer time to consider it, maybe 5 years, maybe 8 years, but we need more time to get this right so that we can think about it properly without going with what's been paid for by consultants working on behalf of one or another authority, coming up with options that suit them and nobody else. I believe it strongly, and I think we should all say, hold on, we want more time.
Thank you, Councillor Cullen. Councillor Kingdon.
Mr Mayor, I was determined not to say anything to repeat what other people say so as not to waste other councillors' time, but I will say something. As somebody who has the job title of Head of AI in my day job, this has to do with many things. It has to do with service delivery, it has to do with democratic accountability, it has to do with taxation. It has nothing to do with AI, so please can we stop distracting members with such nonsense?
Thank you, Councillor Kingdon. Councillor Bunn.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit today about, what the purpose of what we're doing here. We've had a very passionate speech from Councillor Meat earlier about the importance of, local government reorganisation and how it's much needed and the benefits that unitary authorities can bring. And I don't think anyone here is disagreeing with that. I think, we've talked at length in previous meetings, and it was in the leader's speech at the start of the meeting tonight, about how, unitary authorities can bring advantages. They can bring services together. They can be an advantage to knowing, you go to this person and you make one complaint and then it's being dealt with by a thing. The problem there, as Councillor Watts pointed out, is, what happens when you get to that point and they can't go anywhere because you are part of an authority of 600,000 people and you're just, one tiny person within that. And that is what's being looked at with these proposals. They're talking about there are 1.2 million people in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. They want to take that and they want to split it into two authorities. We already know from any of us, those who work on county council or those borough councillors that deal with the county council, how difficult it is to get representation for our specific areas, for our specific residents at that broader level. And that's going. And what's going to happen is that borough representation where you can, you go in, you talk to officers, and they know exactly what you're talking about when you say, Chilwell High Road versus Beeston High Road. These are two distinct places, and they know that. And that's what gets lost when it goes up to this huge authority. And that is why we are critical of the proposals being put today, because there is just this huge loss of local representation, local democracy, local accountability. There is no proposal in here to replace that. There's, in fact, so I take that back, there is one tiny thing where they say, well, actually what we could do is we could make everyone have parish councils and those councils, so we could actually bring in another level. So we're going to abolish boroughs, and for those areas that don't have parish councils or town councils, we're going to bring those back in. So actually, they're just not even going to achieve that abolishment whatsoever. We already have regional authorities. We have MCA. We have a mayor that deals with the whole of Nottinghamshire, Nottingham, Derbyshire and Derby. We have that strategic organisation. Things like transport are being evolved up, increasingly so, to that mayoral authority, so they can have that coordination across the region, so it's not being dealt with at smaller levels. We don't need that regional level because that already exists. What we need below that is sort of the local representation, the local government that people can understand and can access and that understands them. So what we're being confronted here is a choice of options, all of which are restricted by the white paper that was initially published nearly 10 months ago now. And I'll say, I am, as a lot of you here know, I'm a bit of a geek, so when that came out, I was quite excited. I was like, what is being proposed? What is this massive white paper that the government is bringing forward? It's about devolution. I'm a big fan of devolution. I think that's really important. I think it's great. I think local people should have power over the decisions that are made to them. And then so I read through it and I was like, okay, so title is devolution, but we're talking about abolishing local government at the district level. We're talking about evolving powers up. We're talking about less representation. We're talking about fewer councillors representing more people. We're talking about the professionalisation of councillors so that you won't be able to have a day job and, be a councillor and represent your area. It will be so much work that will be your job. You will be there to be a councillor and nothing else. And I don't think that's a good thing because I think it restricts who can be a councillor and who can be engaged. Not everyone who sits on a borough councillor wants to be a full-time politician. Most of us have other jobs, other lives. Doesn't mean we don't care about our role as councillor, doesn't mean we put an awful lot of our time and work into it. But it's part of who we are. It's not, our professional career. Not everyone. I'm sure there are some people here that it is, but not for everyone. So, and now welcome to, this other bit of criticism, which sort of relates to all the things I've just talked about, which is why Broxtowe is not putting a proposal forwards. And that's because that is tightly linked to that white paper, because what was in there was a list of requirements that they wanted to, for any proposals being put forward. And what they were trying to do in this white paper was set out a set of rules so that every proposal across the country, all the areas, were broadly in line with each other. They didn't cost this proposal before they sent it all out there. They didn't do, like levels of like local work. They put this out there. The problem with that is that you have this not quite arbitrary, but you have this set of rules that are set out to apply to every area in the country. And then as it's gone out, each area's gone, well, that doesn't work for us, so can we change this bit of it? Can we change that bit of it? Can we change this? Well, this isn't going to work here. Nottingham, as we've heard, is not going to work because the city's still in a load of debt and is still working through that, which is a particular local concern here. And so you have this set of rules that were laid out, and then those rules have been changing and shifting over the last 10 months. So there are things that were ruled out 10 months ago that potentially could be back on the table now and have been, in fact, tabled in similar ideas tabled elsewhere. So we've ended up in this position where we've had 10 months of debating and looking at options. And I want to say that councillors and our officers have engaged in those meetings. We have attended every single meeting. We have hundreds of them over the last few months. But we're dealing with shifting sands. So what we want to propose is that we actually get time to deal with this properly, to propose something that works for Broxtowe and the wider Nottinghamshire, instead of being forced into a decision that is dictated by terms that have already been shown to be untrue. I want to talk a little bit about that. So, for example, there's the recommendations that have come through from the District Council Network recently, and the key findings there are there is little or no evidence to support a preference for large unitary councils, and no evidence to support the 500,000 population level that was set out in the white paper. The bulk of the data analysed shows a non-existent or fate relationship between a council's population and its outcomes. When there is apparent correlation between population size and outcomes, it more often favours smaller councils. The evidence gives no reason to assume that smaller unitary councils will be less efficient, less sustainable, or less effective due to their size. So we've had this option ruled out for us right at the start of the process, so we were never able to even table it as an option. And yet we've got reports coming through from the District Council Network, we've got reports coming from the Local Government Association showing that this was an arbitrary decision. We've got the reports that came out in the media a few months ago about the lack of costing that went into the white paper and the lack of evidence that actually doing this whole process and having these large unitary authorities is going to bring the savings through that they're arguing for. So what we're facing here is a huge loss of democracy, a huge loss of accountability, a huge loss of direct local engagement, a huge loss of identity, a huge loss of local representation. And for what? For what benefit? The argument is it's going to save money, but there's no evidence for that. So how can we vote for any of the proposals on the table when we have a long list, and I could go on longer, and I won't because I've talked a lot already, and I'm sorry for that, but it is important. We have a long list of reasons not to vote for any of these options. We have a long list of reasons in which they will be bad for the Broxtowe residents that we represent. That makes it just impossible, in my opinion, personally for me, to put my weight behind any of these. So what I really hope will happen tonight, and I'm really pleased that we are doing it, so we are saying none of these are suitable. It's not that we are against local government reorganisation, but that we need to actually acknowledge the research that's coming out from all of these bodies and to enable us to table a position that will actually work for our residents, that will actually benefit them both in the short and the long term, and will benefit the wider region overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bunn. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been enjoying some of the discussions tonight, particularly the primary duty that we have as councillors of Broxtowe Borough Council, and I think we must come to the conclusion that the primary duty of us as Broxtowe Borough Councillors must be to the best interests of the residents of the people of Broxtowe. And if you believe that as a councillor of Broxtowe Borough Council, your primary duty is to the people of the wards that you serve in Broxtowe, well then the most important document before you tonight in these several hundred pages worth of papers is the Broxtowe's impact assessment that has been circulated with these papers. If you believe that the primary duty is to the people of Broxtowe, then the Broxtowe Impact Assessment is the most important document. And as chair of the finance portfolio for Broxtowe Borough Council, as lead portfolio for finance, page 137 of that report sums it up in a nutshell. And it says the financial instability and cross-subsidisation risk that local government review and the three options before you present to Broxtowe are very, very succinctly defined there. It says the concerns regarding Nottingham City Council's financial position, marked by a long-standing Section 114 notice and ongoing fiscal recovery, creates a significant risk that Broxtowe's assets and reserves could be redirected to address City Council financial deficits. That is the view and the advice of officers at this council, and if we have a primary role to represent our residents, that should be a significant consideration for us. I think it gets worse than that, and I've mentioned at previous meetings that other consultant reports produced to try and support other options have said the explicit words that there are significant hidden complexities that aren't presented to anybody in this room and aren't presented within the several hundred pages of supporting evidence tonight. Significant hidden complexities exist that nobody knows yet. It would be an abdication of that duty if now tonight, in the absence of understanding what those significant hidden complexities are, it would be an abdication of duty if we were to vote them through now without understanding the true impact that that may have. It gets even worse than that, because not only do we have those concerns as well, and those financial concerns, some might argue that the City Council is recovering. Some may even try and take credit that as councillors, they are the ones leading that recovery. I don't believe that. I think it's the commissioners who are leading that authority out of financial difficulty. And only this week in the press, the commissioners were quoted as saying that there is a fundamentally toxic environment, a danger of complacency, ill-tempered relationships between councillors and officers, an unhealthy culture, and a relationship between councillors and senior officers that is not seen in other successful councils. And I'll remind everybody that Broxtowe Council, according to the Local Government Association, is a successful council that punches above its weight. I think we know what we're talking about when it comes to risks, when it comes to financial pressures. I don't think, and I don't think the commissioners think, that Nottingham City, for instance, do know what they're talking about when it comes to financial stability and getting yourself out of financial deficit. That's my primary concern, but there are, of course, other concerns. The consultation has been, and I've said this at other meetings, a complete farce. There is no other word for it. You wouldn't elect a school principal. You wouldn't elect a head boy as a consultation the way that you do it now, or the way that the consultation has been ran for this local government reorganisation. Not everybody has seen the same consultation. Not every option has been presented to everybody equally. Not everybody was given the option about whether they agreed with proposals being forced on them at all. And fundamentally, several choices isn't always a choice if they're all the wrong choices. Several choices could actually be a trap. Yeah. They could be tricking us into thinking these are the right choices. And palpably, we don't think that they are. They are not the right choices for Broxtowe. And as we get closer to the day when decisions have to be made, there is significant disagreement between district authorities, county authority, the city authority. There are significant disagreement between councillors in some districts and others. There is disagreement between the MP for Gedling. The Labour MP for Gedling doesn't like 1B, even though Councillor Will Mee does. The Labour MP for Gedling, who was the deputy chair of the Labour group on the entire of the local government association, doesn't think 1B is a very good idea. Now that means either Will Mee's more qualified to make a decision about the future local government for Nottinghamshire, or the deputy leader of the Labour group on the local government association for 7 years is. But there is disagreement there. There is significant disagreement around that option. The MP for Broxtowe doesn't agree with the MP for Gedling. They fundamentally differ in what they think is right for the people of those constituencies. They're both Labour MPs, but they fundamentally disagree. That cannot be right. And the only thing this consultation and this discussion appears to have done is unite everybody in total disarray and total disagreement. And if that is an indicator, then the people who are making the decisions should listen, pause, and take the right decision that saying now is not the right time for local government reform in Nottinghamshire. Councillor Mee said that local government reorganisation is coming, and he had a huge amount of certainty around that position. I'm sure he would have said also with such certainty that winter fuel allowance was a good idea, and 2 days ago probably say that the 2-child benefit cap is here to stay. Now, I disagree with all of those things, and I disagree with the concept that you can't oppose and you can't ask people to start again. That's the reasonable thing to do. That's the grown-up thing to do, and that is the right thing to do. Listen to the people of Broxtowe. 71% said they didn't want it. Listen to the people who've made other contributions to say, this is a joke. Let's start again. Let's engage properly. Let's have a funding-led and a needs-led assessment of what is needed across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. But now is not the right time to pursue any of these options, and we should reject them all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I'm going to go to Councillor Marsh next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had hoped to come before Councillor Marshall because it's always a hard act to follow, so I'll give it a go anyway. Since I wrote things down earlier, I may as well air them, not least because, for our residents who have outright rejected the proposals. So I'm glad to see that today there's almost unanimous commitment to rejecting the proposals that are put before us, with the seeming exception of the Labour group who have decided to go against their pledges to voters in May to back what the residents had said and instead back the so-called Greater Nottinghamshire model. And now I'll accept that it least now has a nicer and more lovingly titled name than option 1B. I'm just going to run through a couple of reasons as to why the proposal fails Broxtowe residents and addresses some of the accusations that have been levelled against us for opposing reorganisation. So firstly, we've heard a number of times from members of the Broxtowe Labour group, as well as that have been echoed by several city councillors online, that because we propose oppose being merged with the city council, that we somehow don't care about children living in poverty in Radford or other parts of the city. The implication presumably being that somehow we think our taxes are too precious to be spent in that way. And we've heard hints of that repeated tonight by Councillor Mee with his comments about the progressive credentials of the Broxtowe Alliance group. Of course, ignoring the lack of self-awareness of a Labour councillor saying that, I would remind the Labour politicians that it was the Broxtowe Alliance who quit the centre-right, now centre-right Labour Party on principle, admittedly some later than others, but the redistribution of wealth is a core value for us, and that it underpins our general philosophy on life and on politics. And in practice, we already do this within the current structures. As Councillor Carr mentioned earlier on, the vast majority of children's social care spending and adults' residential spending goes in Mansfield, Ashfield and parts of Bassetlaw. Nobody in Beeston or Attenborough or Cossall is saying that that's not the way things should be. And in fact, we even redistribute taxes within our own borough to places like Chilwell West and Eastwood. And that's how it should be. But holding up a level of redistribution that even, presumably, don't let me put words in your mouth, but Councillor Owen and the Tories are comfortable with as a reason to why Broxtowe residents should accept having to pay higher council tax for lower quality services, just goes to show how desperate the pro-LGR arguments have become. And I would argue that those councillors should perhaps consider that the catastrophic mismanagement of Labour in the Nottingham City boundary, combined with the government's refusal to properly redistribute national wealth, is a huge driver of the ongoing hardship of those families they claim to speak for. So, I reject that being laid at our door simply because we refuse to accept a bad deal for residents. A bad deal which has been said multiple times over, residents have explicitly told us they do not want. We're also told time and time again that county residents somehow are freeloading on the city because, we go to events or we ride the tram or we go to a shop in the city boundary. But if I go to the Motorpoint Arena, I buy a ticket. If I get on the tram, I pay for it. If I go to a shop or a bar and buy a drink, my custom helps the business pay the rates that go to the city council. And it's insulting to imply that Brochdale residents should somehow accept, again, higher taxes for lower quality services simply because they occasionally go to Corner House. Again, it's a bad deal, and residents have told us that they clearly do not want it. And is it any wonder that they don't want it? All through the report, the negatives, I think, are absolutely guaranteed, and then any supposed positives are purely hypothetical. For example, page 27, we see that local representation will be slashed from 408 councillors currently across the two authorities to 187 in the new super council structure, essentially reducing the democratic purchase and access of residents. In exchange, we're promised vaguely defined neighbourhood public service committees. These committees, which we're told on page 33, would cover 30 to 50,000 residents. Who thinks of their neighbourhood as somewhere that large? Nobody does. And how can this be like the localism that we were promised, especially when we consider that the government have cut funding from 2026 for neighbourhood plans as well. There are dozens of examples of the clear downsides of the proposals, from council tax increases, budget gaps, service downgrades and hypothetical transformation projects that, as far as I can tell from page 103, are made up almost entirely of staff cuts. All obvious negatives, all clear downsides, and the proposed positives we're just supposed to take on trust. As has been said by Councillor Bond and Councillor Cullen, I'm not de facto opposed to the idea of unitary authorities. Done well with proper design, they can provide real strategic advantages. Perhaps, though, instead of copying Europe on how best to punish asylum seekers, this government could copy Europe on how best to run local government. In Germany, for example, a country generally accepted as an exemplar and as a model of local government, municipal authorities typically serve around 10,000 residents through councils that are empowered, close to the people, accessible and crucially properly funded. Not giant cash-starved super councils sitting under a distant regional mayor. I think, again, not to reiterate Councillor Bunn's point, but I think it is important to remember that these reports have not been written to identify what is best for residents. They are written as to how best they meet the government criteria that is rooted in penny pinching, not needs-based assessment. Even the county council's own assessment said that they ran out of time, so they couldn't give you structural drafts when you voted on it last week. So essentially, I support the recommendations in the report. I'll be voting against all of the options in the recorded vote, not least because that's what Brochdale residents have told us they want us to do.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. We've got a few more people to call to speak. I'm calling in the order that you caught my attention. So the next one is Councillor Vanessa Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with all the points made by my Alliance colleagues. I wanted to actually just sort of get down into the detail of this a little bit. I'm the portfolio holder for housing, so when I received these reports, obviously I went straight to the pages that talk about housing and homelessness and how these various proposals claim to be able to improve that situation, that service delivery for people. And there's some good things in here. I'm looking at the Nottinghamshire County Council, Rushcliffe Council proposal, where it talks about tackling homelessness through integration and prevention. And there's some very nice words. There are 4 pillars that 2 new unitary councils will each need to develop: a cross-council homelessness strategy that has a unified approach to unique needs of populations. Of course, right? I think that's a great idea, and that's what all of the current councils strive to do all the time. It then goes on to talk about how that can be achieved. So this is where we start talking about the efficiencies, the economies of scale, the cost cutting. In other words, that we'll need a single housing register, that we currently have. So in Broxtowe, we recently went through the process of changing the system that we use for our housing register. We have an online choice-based letting system. The process that we went through to do that change was lengthy. There was a lot of work to investigate options. There's a whole procurement process that we have to go through. It has to come before Cabinet. There's a lot of work that goes into making that decision to make sure that that system is the right one for the needs of the council. And all of the other councils would have done the same, right? And they use different services. So the system that the city uses will be different from ours. The system that Rushcliffe, Gedling use may be the same, might be different. So if we're coming together as one council, we're obviously going to have to decide which system do we use. Do we use one that one of the existing councils is using? Do we use a new one? Do we have to go through a whole procurement process again because we're a brand new council, right? So there's a lot of things that need to be considered. And that's just one system, right? That's our choice-based letting system. We also have asset management system, our stock condition data is stored on, and that's just within housing. So there are systems like that across different service areas. And to integrate all of these things, it's going to take a lot of time. And to get those decisions right, to make the right choices about what we do and what we use, is going to take a long time. And there are a lot of questions that need to be answered before we can get to that point. The timeline that's being proposed for this to happen just doesn't make sense to be able to get all of those decisions right. And that is one of the main reasons why we should not be rushing through with this. We should not be voting for something that hasn't been properly worked through. The consultants have run out of time on talking about structures as well. You know, and that's just talking about integration of services. You know, you're also looking at council rents, for example. If we've got one council, there will have to be rent convergence. Right? And is that going to, I mean, it'd be great if everybody's rent came down to the level of ours, which is the lowest in the East Midlands, wouldn't it? But I doubt that's going to happen. I may be proved wrong, right? But that's a serious consideration. And that's something that is going to deeply affect our tenants. There's so much that we don't know. And there's so much still to decide. And we are not abdicating responsibility, as others have mentioned. Our officers are already in these discussions. Officers from other councils don't seem to see it as that important. They aren't attending those meetings, which is really disappointing because there's a lot of work to do if we're going to have to do this. So it's not abdicating our responsibility. It's acting on the promises that we made when we were elected on the same manifesto as our Labour colleagues, that there would be no cuts to jobs or services. And we are standing by that commitment to our voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Chris Carr.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to start by saying I think it is quite condescending to say that our residents don't actually know what's going on with local government reorganisation. To say that, thank you. To say that they're not aware of what's happening or they're not bothered, I think is extremely disregard for their views. We are here to represent our residents. We are not here to represent the motives of any political party. We are more here to represent who elected us. So to say that they don't know what they're talking about when they come to us and say they don't want this, that they don't take the time to look into what is being proposed, and to say that just because we got 20% of total households that we shouldn't take that into consideration, when if you actually look at results in the general election last year, voter turnout was just over 50%, and Labour didn't get anywhere near 50% of the vote. So are you saying that, well, that the national government should not be in place because the majority of potential voters did not vote them in? And I've looked through a lot of the documents, and I cannot see anything other than this resulting in cuts. You've got the impact assessment, which Councillor Marshall's gone through, talking about how there are serious financial risks to this. In that assessment, it talks about what is most at risk for those cuts, and that is the cultural services we provide, so things like the D.H. Lawrence Museum, things like Hemlock Happening, Friday 18, all of that could be on the chopping block. We look at the amount of funding that councils get nationally as a whole. It is not sufficient enough for us to provide the services that we need to provide. We put through a motion a few months back, and in one of those we quoted Unison, a union affiliated with the Labour Party, and by their estimates there was a national combined budget gap of about £7 billion a year. Councils aren't getting enough money. This isn't going to save as much as what was originally thought because they didn't fund it. And now we're expected to merge with a city which has massive amounts of debt, and not to tick off Theresa's new bestie, but they've effectively gone bankrupt, not once, but twice. Meaning that they've had to sell off assets, they've had to make cuts to services, they've had to make layoffs, cutting jobs. I'm not brave enough to get in trouble with him that much. But recently, for those that don't know, I have moved, and in that process, gone through a lot of my old stuff. And in one of the boxes, I found a leaflet that I ran on when I was running for election for this borough. And on that, as Councillor Smith has kind of stole my thunder a bit on that, it said in big font, no cuts to jobs and services. Now, I run on that promise. Councillor Mee ran on that promise. Our fellow ward councillor, Councillor Cooper, ran on that promise. And I cannot see any way that if we vote for any of these options, that we would be able to keep that promise, because I can only see that this is going to result in cuts. So that's why I can't support any of these options, because when I went out on the doorstep, I made that promise. I meant it at the time. I mean to keep it. And I do hope that the Labour group, when they were going round in May, that they would say, they were saying that they were going to vote in whatever way that the residents say they voted. 70% of people who did respond said they do not want to be in the city. And I would really want to remind that Councillor Bales online made a promise that he would do that as well. I've got a screenshot of that comment you made, Simon, if you want to see it after the meeting. Yeah, no. I hope you fulfil that promise as well. We are elected because of the promises we make on the doorstep. If we break those promises, we are breaking the trust between councillors and residents. I don't want to break that trust.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Bales.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for reminding me, Councillor Carr. Yeah, you're right. You did stand on those promises when you stood for election as a Labour councillor, as everyone here did. Now, the only person that's put themselves forward, three people put themselves forward for re-election as their new party. So, Councillor Cullen, Jeremiah, and Dan Heimer. Everyone else stood as a Labour councillor and made a promise to residents as Labour councillors. And then when it suited them to move, they left the party. They were so keen on fulfilling their promises, maybe they should put themselves back up for re-election. There's no point shaking your head, Colin, because that is the state. Right, okay. So, yeah, we'll go on to principles as Councillor Tyers.
Point of order. Councillor Bales has forgot
Sorry,
me.
I forgot that you stood as well.
I know
Sorry,
I'm
Councillor
quiet,
Duff.
but
You stood as well. I apologise. And didn't get that. Sorry. On principle. So Councillor Marsh talked about on principle and self-awareness. Now, the county council elections in May with the Labour group, he was so principled, he was working for the Labour Party at that point. He was working for the Labour group before he quit because he's principled because they weren't paying him anymore. So, excellent principles. Well done. Right.
It is a
It's
bit
not
personal.
personal. Sorry, Councillor Marsh, you wouldn't let Councillor Couch have a right of reply.
Can we allow the person who's speaking to speak without being interrupted, please?
Thank you. Councillor McRae, you mentioned about voluntary groups. I know you do a lot with voluntary groups. There's lots of people here that do a lot with voluntary groups, and it's really good. The City Council actually have £10,000 per 3-member ward to give to voluntary groups. So what you said wasn't quite correct. I know what you were getting to, but it wasn't quite correct. There is 6,000 for 2-member wards and 10,000 for 3-member wards, which is excellent. It's nice that actually, the personal insults aside, which were going well up until a couple of councillors spoke and then I stood up, everyone seems to actually be of the opinion that local government reorganisation actually might be a good thing, but it's being rushed. Tends to be a lot of what the comments have been made have said, that in principle the idea of local government reorganisation might be a good thing done in the right way. We're 9 months into the process since the white paper was published and the councils were written to. In that 9 months, this council could have put a proposal forward that sat better with what people here believed in. We could have done that. Councillor Owens, from the start, you've been clear with what your proposal was. That's fine. But this council could have put something forward they haven't. Heads are being buried in the sand. We talk about the service this council provides, and some of the officers are absolutely excellent. Absolutely. Emma, who's in environment, on holiday, she actually messaged me Sunday night. I forgot she was on holiday. I apologise. She came back to me straight away. That level of service is excellent. We've got to be really proud of how our officers work, behave, and the jobs they fulfil. So, with them being so good, why hasn't this council said, as Councillor, I think it was Councillor Marshall said, we are an exemplar of the council. Why haven't we put ourselves forward saying, right, why don't we have a Greater Broxtowe area as a proposal, taking in bits of Strelly that are already in Councillor Owen's ward, Wollerton, make a big area where this is the centre. That could have been a proposal, but nothing was put forward.
Just a point
Well,
of
it's
order.
just looking. It's not one of the proposals.
Just a point of order
in
that
here.
we did, but the requirements didn't allow us to put them forward.
You've not had any proposals put forward. We've got 1B, 1E, and our residents weren't given the option of the city option, which was known about before that was done. And we talk about the money spent, and we haven't spent the money on a consultation. It's quite clear we haven't, because that's what you get for a lot of money. That's what you get for a lot of money, that one. And for £78.40, I think the quote was, that's what we had, with a spelling mistake on the 4th page and an impact assessment report that doesn't actually talk about any of the options. It's more to do with the fact, I don't know if it's more to do with the fact that we want to have more pen pal correspondence with the deputy leader. I know it's ongoing. I think Councillor Chris Carr, you might get one now. You can join the club. Milan, I was disappointed with your speech. I don't think he'll be writing to you tonight. It was very clear and straightforward. But that's all that seems to be about, is a pen pal report. Because this impact report isn't about any of the options. We talk about an abdication of duty. That is an abdication of duty. Our ward members, our residents of Broxtowe, should be able to look through an impact assessment report and talk about what is good, what is bad about the proposals. This doesn't. This says what's bad about the City Council compared to Broxtowe. It doesn't say what we could do to improve it. That is abdication of duty. We talk about facilities, and sometime down the line, Bramcote will get built. which will be excellent. It's a good thing for the south of the borough. Hopefully that will get built. But when we're discussing about the design of Bramcote, and I queried, and other councillors did as well, pool depth to do with artistic swimming, for example. I was told by a senior officer, pool depth is not a requirement for Bramcote, as competitions take place at Harvey Haddon, which is in the city of Nottingham. So senior officers of this council are happy to shortchange people of Broxtowe to use city facilities. People in my ward can travel 2.6 miles to Harvey Haddon in the city, 40 minutes by public transport. They can travel 2.4 miles to Ken Martin, 34 minutes on public transport in the city. Or they can go twice as far, twice as long to get to Bramcote, but it's going to take them an hour, over an hour to get there. So residents in Nuttall and Watnell can travel a short distance to a pool they have no say over, other than paying the money, but no say over the running of it. Using city transport, they have no say over, other than paying their ticket. They have no representation there to use a pool that's inferior, because actually our council want us to use city facilities. The city boundary already runs through estates. In Horsendale, on Gloucester Avenue, the city boundary runs through their garden. Council where you live, there's some houses there that back onto Broxtowe Park, and I get emails, I'm sure you do, about the antisocial behaviour on Broxtowe Park. So we already have that correlation with those parks. And you were saying it wasn't in the Labour Party manifesto. It was. There was a quote that said, encourage local authorities to come together and take on new powers. Now, I don't think any manifesto actually states explicitly exactly to the word, the exact wording of local government reorganisation, but it's clear in there what they were going to do. And Councillor Chris Carr, when you mentioned about the electorate, 225% more of the electorate voted for that manifesto than they did for this, than responded to Broxtowe. 1 in 10 people in Broxtowe responded with their opinions. I've had 2 emails about LGR. I've had 30 about the local development, but 2 about LGR. And whilst they weren't sure about LGR, because they had looked at it, well, they did understand it, they weren't sure about it, but what they wanted is compromise. They wanted a compromise. They didn't like the city option, but they thought actually that showed compromise. And that's the words that they use in their emails to me, compromise. But our residents didn't get an option to vote on that city option. So I will be listening to my residents, Councillor Carr. But the problem is, only 2 of them have actually responded to me. And they wanted an option that this council decided not to spend, to put in the postcard, that we spent £8,000 on. You can if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Vale. Councillor Land.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'll try and be brief. The summary that Councillor Bales has disparaged is short, but it's pretty succinct, I would say. Larger unitaries are more likely to require exceptional financial support. It's all about the money. Most data shows no positive correlation between population size and outcomes. We in this chamber are all about what is best for our residents. We had a consultation that, whilst the responses were limited, it was still pretty significant compared to some of the other consultations this council regularly runs. I was astounded to hear last month about 12,500 responses to the consultation that Broxtowe sent out, more than the county-wide consultation that was sent out. And what it feels like to me when I've been reading through all these masses of papers and reports is we're faced with, like, what is the least worst option? And I'm not comfortable with just voting for the least worst option. I want the best for our residents, the best for our area, the best for our county and our city, for our people. And I don't believe that any of the options put before us offer the best. And I think what we should be able to send a strong message to the government ministers that more time is needed. I heard echoes of these sentiments in other council meetings from the reports that I've read about councillors in other areas feeling that they were having to vote for the least worst option. And I think we'd be doing our communities a disservice by putting forward any of the options that are before us this evening. We need more time to work out the detail, to work out a fair way to do this, and I don't believe what's before us is fair or equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and Councillor Jeremiah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just quite surprised that Will actually dissed 22% return in terms of the consultation on Broxtowe. Pretty large sample size as far as I'm concerned, certainly a big lot greater than 2. So very, very surprised on that. I think Councillor Mead does make a few good points about unitary authorities, and I think our leader has said that we're not actually against that, and I do see lots of benefits in terms of, there is confusion over who to report to, but I'm very surprised that none of those benefits are actually in your Stapleford South East election candidate selling those benefits, because certainly on the doorstep, certainly support what's actually the results of the survey, which is that it's very, very unpopular, mainly based on joining the city, which was the only 3 options that we were given. And based on that, I do think it is important. I think there is awareness from all parties here that it is really very, very unpopular, certainly the option of joining the city. So therefore, I will not be supporting any of those 3 options.
Councillor Jeremiah. Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, just like to say that when people from the city come to Inham Rec, we welcome them and we even let them play football there. So, we've talked about how much this is all going to cost, how much we're going to lose when it happens, but I've been trying to find out who pays for the actual transition time. And according to the documents that I've read, it says that the districts will pay for the transition over a number of years through efficiencies. Now, I don't know about other councils, but I suspect they don't have any efficiency savings left. If we want a new swing or something, we are very, very careful with our funds to provide a new swing or some small thing that we can provide by efficiencies within our departments. But if the people have got to provide for this whole transition period, which, as you know, Councillor Smith has just described a few things, how they were going to cost so much money and so complicated and so much effort, the efficiencies are going to have to be pretty big, and at the end of these several years of efficiency savings, when people have suffered virtual austerity in order to achieve them, we'll just start with the blank page then of the new authority. So it's all just really, it just seems to me, for the people of Broxtowe, it's just suffering after suffering with no benefit at the end of it. And I haven't heard any benefit today, and I think the people who are totally against it know that there won't be any. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must admit that I don't remember the original reorganisation in the 1970s. I wasn't studying for university, I wasn't even 6, and at the risk of upsetting some members, I was actually minus 22. However, as seemingly with most things that this government touches, the local government reorganisation is a disaster. It's poorly thought out, poorly planned, and extremely rushed, as we have heard here tonight. In a similar vein to Councillor Bunn, I am somewhat geeky myself, and a personal favourite TV show is Yes Minister. And at this time, I feel like I must quote Sir Humphrey Appleby and say that this government has fallen into the politician's fallacy of that reorganisation must be done of some description. This something that we have before us is an option, so this something must be done, which doesn't help anyone who actually needs proper help and the proper services that are provided by our councils. It's all right saying that all of the authorities will be abolished and reformed into the two separate options. However, given that this extra expanded city idea has come from the City Council, that is clearly not the case. That's what the reality is. And it doesn't matter what you say about it or what you call it or how you wish to describe it. The fact is, the way residents see it, the way residents feel about it, is that we are being taken over by the financially illiterate and incompetent City Council. That is the fact. That is how the vast majority of our residents, certainly my residents, feel. And it's interesting that we hear that the idea that this is a good idea for us to move within the city boundaries because it's the economic engine of our local area, which is a lovely idea, apart from what has actually grown in the last few years in the city, other than student accommodation and crime. Nothing. And that's the reality. There is no economic outcome and output that is going to be meaningful to the people here in our borough. At the time when we've discussed this previously, I, in line with my group, feel that the better option was to have the counties together and the city to stay as one. And the idea that that is because we don't care about the areas that are affected in the city is not only really quite a disgusting accusation to be levelled against us, no matter what party that you're from. I also feel that that idea is somewhat hypocritical, given that from the looks of the maps of this expanded area that the city have put out, is excluding Eastwood, which we know, I do apologise, Millen and other Eastwood councillors, is one of the most affected areas with difficulties that we know and we see in this borough. But the city are quite happy to keep them out of it, and it's no longer their business. But they're more than happy to take places like Beeston and Stapleford, which, although also have their issues, are in a somewhat better position than our colleagues to the furthest northern reaches of our borough. But I have to say, I can appreciate the idea why the ruling administration haven't put forward a plan. I certainly think that the changing goalpost that we have seen since the publishment of the white paper has not helped and is quite a large hindrance, but it is still disappointing that we couldn't get to a point where we had a Broxtowe-led plan to be able to vote on tonight, and it is a shame. It's also been stated tonight that we've seen that the reason we should go with the likes of option 1B is because it seems to be the least worst option. Well, that's not only really silly, it's really unfair on our residents who do need the support the most, regardless of where they are in the borough, regardless of what ward that they live in. But to have all of their things given and taken from them, and proper support, which will happen in such a large additional authority, is just backwards and completely wrong to allow that to happen. So, as many people have said tonight, it's clear that from the conclusions of the information before us and statements made by members, I don't feel like I can support any of the options that are before us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. I think I've called in everybody who's. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Chair. Mine will be brief because I've listened to a lot that what's been said. But there's one thing I think a number of us have touched on is cuts here and cuts there. And Councillor McRae mentioned something, Councillor Stockwell. My concern that throughout all this, there's nothing on how crime will no doubtedly increase. because if you look at most cities in the whole of England, the cities are where your deprived areas are, which are either by poorly run councils or badly run councils or whatever, but that's where, and it spreads out. That is one of my concerns. The prime example of cuts is that they've already, I'll say it, sacked Gary Godden, haven't they? He's finished in a bit. So there's one of the cuts that's apparently going to happen. So who's going to be in charge of the kids when you want somewhere to go, look after them, this, that and the other, like Richard says. In the town, it just spreads out. You've had it in Beeston, you'll have it everywhere. So there's nothing in there about the way I believe it'll increase crime as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I was plus 22 at the last local government reorganisation. And I've aged quite a bit since then, as you can tell. But over the past few weeks and months, it's become absolutely clear what total chaos there is as far as this proposed local government reorganisation is concerned. And you think it can't get any worse, and then the city jump in with their idea. And you think, oh no, it has got worse, if that is in any way possible. Now, Councillor Mee tries to tell us that it's all a very simple idea. And it is. It's a very simple idea, and the simple idea is that people in Broxtowe, Gedling or Broxtowe and Rushcliffe pay off the city's debts. That's what it's all about. There's nothing else to it. You're going to pay off the city's debts because they've got themselves into a mess, and we certainly aren't going to bail them out. And so he says, well, you've got an imperfect system at the moment, and it may well be imperfect. But the options, he says, are also imperfect. But you've got to vote on one of them to replace one imperfect system with another imperfect system. Now, that to me doesn't make sense, unless, of course, you're a member of the Labour Party, and then you can get to cabinet status on that sort of theory. The options, and yes, we did, as a party, try to reorganise local government in Nottinghamshire. About 8 years ago, we came up with ideas. It was a county-wide and a city unitary. And guess what? People said, no, we don't want it. Across the county, they said, no, we don't want it. And so we as a party said, right, we will listen. We're not going to force this upon you. We can't force it upon you. You don't want it. So we listened to what people said. And we abandoned the idea. So perhaps the Labour Party could take a lead from our example. Talks about Broxtowe's towns being distinct. Kimberley's distinct. Stapleford's distinct. Eastwood's distinct. And then what does he want to do but merge them into Greater Nottingham? Where will the distinctiveness be then? And the trouble is that all the options include Broxtowe, or in the case of the city's idea, part of Broxtowe. And we've had recently the unedifying spectacle of the Labour MP for Broxtowe begging and pleading with the government minister to include Eastwood into that Greater Nottingham. Talk about standing up for your residents. And of course, as has been pointed out, the MP for Kimberley and Nuttall and Strelley and Watnall couldn't care less about those areas, as we always said he wouldn't. More concerned with trying to stop boats and things like that, with the usual degree of success. So,
all of the options include Broxtowe, at the moment, include Broxtowe joining with the city. And remember, it is a joining with the city, it is a merging, it is a taking over of Broxtowe and Gedling, or Broxtowe and Rushcliffe, because the numbers dictate that. Councillor Carr pointed that out a meeting or two ago. And they tried to soften the pill by saying, well, all the existing councils will be dissolved and you'll get a new council. As though all of those that have been running Nottingham City are going to disappear, you know, a bit like a Tommy Cooper trick. Boom, gone. Of course they won't. They'll just be there, wanting to grab hold. They remind me, the Nottingham City Council and the Labour group there, they remind me of Attila the Hun outside of Rome, looking at the spoils, looking at what can be plundered from Gedling, from Broxtowe, from Rushcliffe. Fortunately for the Romans, they turned Attila back, and that's what we need to do. I read it up, they did. It was Alaric that sacked Rome, not Attila the Hun. And that's what we need to do. Now, the city are completely bankrupt, aren't they? That's been pointed out more than once tonight. They're financially bankrupt, they're politically bankrupt, they're morally bankrupt. There's anarchy in the council house, there's anarchy on the street, and yet there are some in this council chamber that want us to join with or be taken over by Nottingham City Council. Now, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to join with Nottingham City? Well, Labour, I presume it's because the party told them to do so. That's a national policy, and therefore you've got to vote for it. And if you don't, you get kicked out. Yeah. Well, fine. That's the way. If that's the way it is. And Reform, well, quite frankly, Reform just told lies, didn't they? They told lies at the county council election. They said they would have nothing to do with local government reorganisation and joining in with the city. And what do the Broxtowe Reform councillors do? I think they all voted for Broxtowe to join with the city. If they had a shred of... Sorry? The ones that turn up. Well, if any of them had a shred of decency, they would resign. That's what they should do. But they haven't got a shred of decency. Because unfortunately, I know some of them. Now, residents of Broxtowe, 71% of those who voted said they do not support any of the options on the table. Those 71% have been abandoned and betrayed by Labour and Reform. Now, we will vote against any option. We will stick to our promises. We will vote against any option that proposes to take us into the city, because we don't believe it's in the best interests of our residents. And Councillor Couch was attacked quite unjustifiably for saying how it would affect her personally. And she was right to do that, because of course she then talks to all the residents in the area that she represents, or a good proportion of them, and shares that experience, and they share that experience with her. I've had no emails about local government reorganisation. That's probably because Broxtowe email system's not working, which is usually the case. But I go around and talk to them. And not one of them has said, oh, please vote for us to join with the city. Quite the reverse. For goodness sake, Don't take us into the city. We don't want to join the city. We don't want to go there. Time and time again. But as has been pointed out, I do feel, and I've always said this, that there is a bit of a weakness in Broxtow's case. We know what we don't want, but we haven't said what we do want. And I think it's wrong not to have done that. And I, yet again, on behalf of my group, are proposing an amendment, which somebody somewhere will hand out to you. I'll just sit.
Thank you.
You need to consider the amendment first. Maybe what we
Okay, I'll suggest, if members are willing, that while this is being handed out, that we have a short adjournment so that people can look at this and then reconvene. Do we need to vote on that?
Yeah, just have a show.
Can I just have a show of hands in favour of a sort of what shall we say, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
10 minutes, okay, thank you. I think I was carried. Okay, if I could ask all councillors to take their seats, please, and we'll continue with the meeting. Thank you. We'll continue with the meeting. Before we do, we've got this amendment that's been proposed by Councillor Owen. I need to hand over to the legal officer first, please.
Thank you. So we have had the amendment which has been considered, and as a point of order against the Constitution, we're not able to add words that would negate the motion that's on the table. Currently, what is being considered are the three options that will be singly voted against. This is adding the fourth. If this motion were to be brought, it would only be if those options failed, and that could then be tabled again. But there's another complication that, as the guidance by MHCLG sets out, only a single option can be proposed by each council. This proposal is effectively to not support any of the proposals. But if that continues and government decide to proceed with LGA, an alternative is being proposed that you then support to unitary solution as set out. So that sets out two proposals, because a no proposal is deemed a proposal under the guidance. So on that basis, it doesn't meet the criteria. I say that for the two reasons, it can't be accepted as a negating, and it doesn't follow the guidance. And through you, Mayor, if you're in agreement, that would mean that this proposed amendment wouldn't be put to the proposer and the seconder to consider.
Right, I will continue then. This comes as no great surprise to me that I'm thwarted by a Labour government from putting forward a proposal that would effectively open up for further discussions the possible options available to Nottinghamshire residents. And for those who have not had a copy of this, our amendments did say that in the event that local government reorganisation proceeds, this council should support the two unitary council solution, namely one unitary council for the city and one for the rest of the county, based on existing boundaries. Now, if local government were to go ahead, then that to me is the most sensible solution to the whole process, because it would mean that things like children's social services, adult social care would not have to be disaggregated, which is what will be the case under any of the proposals that are therefore that we are told now are non-proposals that we're going to vote on. So we're going to vote on non-proposals, but we can't vote on a substantive proposal. And my opening comments basically were that local government reorganisation is in chaos. And if you needed any further proof, then what has just been said just perfectly demonstrates that. We, as I've said, will not support any recommendation, any proposal that suggests that we should go into the city. The report that talks about the potential effects is damaging in itself, and it's damaging, as Councillor Couch has pointed out, to all residents of this borough in terms of increased council tax costs, increased housing rents, and the loss of political accountability. We will never support that. We cannot support that. Our position has remained clear and consistent from the very beginning, and we will not deviate from that. I'm sorry that we're not able collectively to proceed with an exploration of a more reasonable and meaningful way forward. But if the rules say that we can't, then of course the rules have been drawn up by a Labour government, and you can't expect anything better, can you? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We made a proposal there, but one of the things that I believe is that option 2, which was at the beginning, was put forward right at the beginning in February this year, was quickly withdrawn because what they've suddenly realised was that actually probably most of the councils around the area would agree on it, because they would look at it and they'd think, hang on a minute, there's a chance here of us being put into the city. So what was quickly happened was, because they come out with this thing that say it didn't fit number wise, so it was withdrawn. But if it hadn't been withdrawn, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion tonight, because what would happen, we would be in unison as a county about us as boroughs in the county working together and not being involved with the city. So I think they withdrew it deliberately because they knew that probably we would all agree with it if we were given a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. I think I've called on everybody who wishes to speak, so if there's nobody else, then we'll move to Councillor Radulovic to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for a somewhat mildly amusing debate on the future of local government. And I say mildly amusing because I think I've heard it all tonight, from personal insults put out by 2 Labour councillors, to issues around financial incompetence, moral bankruptcy, financial bankruptcy. I think I've covered everything, and I've even had Councillor Stockwell, who was minus 22, I think, when local government was reorganised. Well, unfortunately for myself, you know, I wasn't. I was actually plus 18 when the first local government reorganisation came about. And so when I was around, it was actually the 1973 Hybrid Act voted in 1974 to respond to what comment that Councillor Watts made, in particular reference to the way in which it was done at the time. And it was done to get rid of the urban districts, if you remember, because people in Eastwood, like myself, parted Baseford. Well, those who do remember, I remember it well, you know. I remember it well. We were actually put into the original, we was part of Rushcliffe constituency at Hilltop Eastwood. Eastwood actually wasn't in Broxtowe or any other, we were actually in Rushcliffe. So right up to where the memorial is at Plumtree Way was actually under Rushcliffe for the general election constituency, and then in Broxtowe in the 1973 Hybrid Act and 1974 Local Government Act. And of course in 1992 we were involved when the city became a unitary city. When it was broke off from the county, we supported that in favour. I can still remember attending the public sessions and attending sessions as then leader of the opposition at Broxtowe Borough Council, arguing that a unitary city would be in far best interests of everybody in Nottinghamshire for delivering local services. However, what we did not support was an expanded city boundary at that time because of the impact that it would have on the residential and rural areas across Nottinghamshire. And that's what the essence really is all about. It's as though we used to go back 10 years, you know, we say the wheel comes round every 10 years, then it's 20 years, then it's 30 years, now it's 50 years. You know, we seem to go back chewing over the same arguments and the same failed arguments that people put forward so many times that the new government quickly runs out of steam on local government reorganisation, usually after the first year, because they realise it's impossible. And I always quote, when I talk to our people about local government reorganisation, there's a quote from Eric Pickles. And Eric Pickles once said that the best tool that he had as a politician was he kept a weapon in the drawer, and any time any civil servant mentioned local government reorganisation, he said he'll take the gun out and shoot them, because it was the biggest minefield going possible. But we've heard a lot tonight, and I want to pick up on a couple of things that people have said. And I want to talk about, well, what do we want? That's what you've said. And you said, you accuse us tonight, Wilmy, of saying we've got absolutely no proposals and you also chose to mock the results and the public who voted in that survey. Yes, you did. Well, you're on record. You're on YouTube. You can see it yourself tonight what you said. So when you look at it, what we said from the outset, when this was first mooted, before any figures were out, the first issue I raised at the board that we met at was saying one of the best ways of reorganising would be to look at historical backgrounds, in particular proximity, services, industry, so it would be Broxtowe, Erewash, Amber Valley and Ashfield. And that was rejected straight away because they said, straight away, then you can't split up county boundaries. Then we put forward alternative proposals about looking at the way in which service delivery is done across Nottinghamshire, in particular reference to social services and to special educational needs. But the social services one is the most important because it needs to be based on a 10-year rolling programme looking at life expectancy and service dependency and service delivery over a decade, not 10 minutes. And that's the argument that we've made all along. So we say we're in favour of local government review based around needs-based assessment of what your community needs to meet population trends and movements and people, like you do in a local plan, like you do in the census, and yet we get none of this, none of it. It all seems to be financial based around numbers and finance and not people. And that's morally wrong to me. That is against everything I stand for as a politician. And what I've done tonight, I've put you out a paper on your desk tonight, you'll see it. And it's quite clear. And it talks about all the groups and organisations that this was supported over the last 3 years. That's the one. How we promote community cohesion, how we try to develop personalities and people and give hope to communities through our programme. And that doesn't include things like parish council grants, grants to individuals, the businesses that we support, the training programmes, people into employment. That's just a list of community-focused groups that we support to try and promote community cohesion within all our areas. And so instead of arguing about the way in which services are delivered, this has become about numbers and finance. And that to me is wrong. And where I tend not to get onto a personal level at politics, some of the Labour members tonight, particularly Peter, and I'm very, very disappointed with what you said tonight, Peter Bales. Very disappointed. I think you're very personal, particularly against Tyler. It was totally unnecessary and totally incorrect of you. We never left the Labour Party. The Labour Party left the working class people.
Yes.
That's what happened. That's the reality. And you're going to pay for it at the ballot box as you started paying for it in May. Absolutely. And you also missed me off your list, Aston's and Alliance Council as well in the County Council. No, it's okay. I'm used to being missed out by you. So Mr. Mayor, when you talked again about the consultation that you tried to pull us apart on, you were invited by me to be on part of that consultation arrangements for the Broxtowe consultation that we carried out. You were there, Philip. You were there, Peter, online. And we time and time again asked you what you thought should, and you refused to comment. Do you remember, Philip? Yeah. I asked you personally to your face. I said, what do you support then? Can we put this out? Is this consultation right? Does it include everything? Is there anything you want at it? And you didn't say a word. You're on file, Peter.
You didn't tell us the city option, well,
You're, because the city option wasn't even agreed till last week.
Can we not interrupt, please? Thank you.
It wasn't even agreed till last week. That's the point that we're making. What we had was a vague map. Do you remember that green splurge around this pink light line? And nobody knew where the city boundary was. So when we looked at that, it was rejected by the districts and the county and the cities. But the city and the county, of course, didn't come to our meetings that we've had. And the very last meeting that we attended, myself and the chief executive here, was last Friday. And they put forward the arrangements that they were going to vote for, which was option 1E. So you're already out with the rest of the districts in Nottinghamshire. It's actually option 1E. And when I pointed out to them that their so-called democracy arrangements around 5,000 people, they got 16 for Rushcliffe, 8 for Broxtowe, and 20 for the city. And at the bottom of this table equals 42. And I pointed out to them, I says, when I went to school, I've admitted it's a few years ago, I've told you it's 1972 I left school, 16 and 8 and 20 equals 44. And that's the very first page of the paper that they're putting forward about the democratic arrangements for a new authority. And there were 6 chief executives in that room, 6 leaders, plus all the support staff, and none of them could add up 3 numbers. Fills me with confidence for the rest of the meeting. However, I did make them pay for it. You'll be delighted to know. But let's look at some of the other issues that have been raised tonight, if we can. For instance, I've talked in this council chamber many times. Councillor Vanessa Smith talked about things like convergence on there. What does that mean? Rent convergence. We all know city council rents are much higher than Broxtow's, an average of £10 to £11 a week extra. Rushcliffe, of course, don't even own their own housing stock, sold it off. Gedling Homes does not own their own housing stock, Gedling Council. We do in Broxtowe. We bought it on behalf of the people. It belongs to the ratepayers and taxpayers of Broxtowe, not the government. We aren't an agent for the government on housing. We actually own our own housing stock. And that presents a multitude of complications. They've 1,000 people in temporary accommodation in the city council. We've got 2 families. 2. And that's too many. Vanessa will tell you, I argued this, it's far too many. It's too many. However, that's the sort of convergence that we're talking about. And harmonisation proposals. What does harmonisation proposals mean? I've already told you in this council chamber, a Band-E property, you pay £175 more in council tax in the city than you do. You pay more rent, and your local council tax support scheme is not nearly as generous as the operation scheme by Broxtowe Borough Council. And we haven't even talked about armed forces discount and other issues that we bring forward, and the promotion of a multitude of groups to promote community cohesion. But also I want to talk to you about some of the insulting things that's been said, particularly on Facebook and on social media, about how Broxtowe and the city will use all their facilities. I'd just like to point out something to you. If it wasn't for the people moving into the city to go to the ice stadium and to go to the castle, they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't have any facilities. They wouldn't have any areas of interest if nobody went there. We are subsidising them. It's called business and trade. And yet we don't seem to understand the basic principles of all this. And when we talk about the lack of services, I try not to get into the personal side of financial mismanagement or whatever has happened in other authorities. I'm more concerned about what happens in Broxtowe. But if what happened in Broxtowe, if we were having to cut services because of financial incompetence or mismanagement, there would be an awful lot of people looking for a new job. That I can assure you. We try to sponsor and help. We try to promote community cohesion. We don't close centres. We don't stop grants. We actually pay, and the Broxtowe taxpayers give us the responsibility through the ballot box of administering those on behalf of the residents of the borough. We aren't even a grant-aided authority. It's paid for by the taxpayers of this borough. So all that list that I've gave you is all part of your council tax on both sides. And when you also look at some of the other things that's been raised tonight, you know, we talk about and expand the city, one of the options that we looked at originally, Teresa Cullen in particular mentioned. We actually said that, what about if you broke the city? Part of it went into Rushcliffe, part of it went into Gethin, part of it went into Broxtowe. It would be much more financially viable and much more support. That was knocked on the head straight away. So to say we put forward no proposals is a lie. It's a lie, and to challenge people tonight, that's a lie. I have always said that we are open to the idea of reorganisation, but it must be around service delivery, community cohesion, and the way forward for future generations, and not mired in paying someone else's debt. That is not right, and it's not fair. So, Mr. Mayor, I do not really want to I've got to realise I've gone on probably a little bit too long, but I think it's important to understand that in a democracy, it doesn't matter whether your turnout is 10% or 50% or 22%. It makes no reference whatsoever in any document. Always it was said in democracy, one is enough. Pardon? Churchill. It was in a democracy, one is enough. And that, Mr. Mayor, is 22% is a turnout or a vote returned on a consultation, which is more in Broxtowe than the entirety of the county council and city council put together. Yep. That shows the strength of feeling. Now, I want to make it clear that tonight, what I'm asking you to reject are the proposals that's on the table. And we will ask the government through Cabinet tomorrow night to go back to the drawing board and actually look at serious local government reorganisation based around service delivery and the way in which this country can move forward as a nation, and that we are not stuck with somebody else's debt that will rapidly increase our council tax bills to a level where indirect taxation, so they don't break their general election promise on general tax. That's what it's all about. We are going to have to pay for it through indirect taxation, and that is grossly unfair. Mr. Mayor, I urge all councillors tonight to refuse to vote for all these three options. That's 1B, 1E, and option 1B2, and send Cabinet a clear message tomorrow night that we will inform the government that we want them to go back to the drawing board and take seriously the issues of local government reorganisation based around service need and delivery, and not bailing out somebody else's financial mess.
Thank you, Councillor Radulovic. Before we move to the vote, you called at the outset, you said you wanted a recorded vote. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Okay.
We need a show of 5 hands.
And we need a show of hands in favour. Yeah, I think that's easily carried. Thank you. So we'll take the
1B first, shall I?
Yeah, we'll take
commence the vote. This is this is for proposal 1B. You can vote for, against, or abstain. Councillor Bagshaw.
For.
Councillor Bales.
For.
Councillor Brown. Yeah. Councillor Bullock.
Against.
Councillor Buck. Sorry, Barbara. Councillor Chris Carr.
Against.
Councillor Steve Carr.
Against.
Do you want to read the numbers out?
Yep. Okay, thank you. That was for the motion, 4 against 31.
Sorry.
Sorry.
It was 5 against.
Sorry, 5 for.
Okay.
Correct that.
Okay.
31 against.
I'll now proceed with proposal 1E. Councillor Bagshaw.
Okay.
So have I got 36?
Thanks. Sorry.
So there must be 36 people here.
Thank you. That was unanimous, 36 against. So
Okay.
No, so the proposal is B.
B2.
I'm just going to shout the members' name for proposal 1BII. Councillor Bagshaw.
Abstain.
Councillor Bales. Councillor Brown. Councillor Bullock.
Against.
Councillor
Sorry,
Bunn.
slow down a second.
Slow down a bit, sorry.
But
Just go a little bit slow.
abstain from Bales, Councillor Brown.
Against.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was against. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Bunn.
Against.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
Against.
Councillor Chris Carr.
Against.
Councillor Steve Carr.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
Abstain.
Councillor Couch.
Against.
Councillor Cullen.
Against.
Councillor Danheimer.
Against.
Councillor Facio.
Abstain.
Councillor Harlow.
Against.
Councillor Jeremiah.
Against.
Councillor Khalid.
Against.
Councillor Kingdon.
Against.
Councillor Land.
Against.
Councillor Donna McRae.
Against.
Councillor Richard McRae.
Against.
Councillor Marsh.
Against.
Councillor Marshall.
Against.
Councillor McGrath.
Against.
Councillor Me. Councillor Jill Owen.
Against.
Councillor Philip Owen.
Against.
Councillor Patson.
Against.
Councillor Pringle. Councillor Radulovic.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
Against.
Councillor Pauline Smith.
Against.
Councillor Vanessa Smith.
Against.
Councillor Stockwell.
Against.
Councillor Tideswell.
Against.
Councillor Watts.
Against.
Councillor Webb.
No, 30 and 6.
13-6, yeah.
30 and 6 abstain.
Okay, so the result of that was 30 against and 6 abstentions. So before we move on to item 2, I'll just read, as I've already pointed out, the wording is incorrect on that page. So I'll just repeat what the wording should be. It should be to recommend to Cabinet that the impact assessment report as set out in Appendix D be submitted to the Secretary of State by Broxtowe Borough Council as part of this process. Okay, so before we go to the vote, the interim chief executive needs to... Oh,
just bear 1 second.
In which one?
In the last one. Yeah, Councillor Khalid wasn't called for, I'm afraid. In
Sorry?
The last one. Can we just clarify Councillor Khalid's
Councillor Khalid.
On 1B.
Can we just clarify your vote on the last one, please? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had it.
Can we clarify the abstentions, please?
So,
So, I've got abstentions.
just a minute, just bear one second.
So if we can just get clarification on the abstentions, I've got Councillor Bagshaw, Councillor Bales, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Fascio, Councillor Jeremiah, and
No. Jeremiah was against, not abstention.
so that makes it 30.
Your career could have been shortened, sir. Yeah.
So it's 31 against and 5 abstentions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Should we read them too fast?
Yeah, I don't know, well, it's 20 to
Do you know
10.
what? It's because I don't put a tick, I actually put the number.
Yeah.
And that-
Okay,
that's
so
fine.
before we take the vote on item 2, the interim chief executive needs to give a point of clarification.
I just want to let members know that the impact assessment report only covers the option of the city merging with Broxton. It doesn't cover the other proposals, i.e. 1B, 1BII and 1E. Right. No, 1B includes Gedling, the city and Broxton. This analysis is just for the city and Broxton. Yeah, just making sure people are aware of that.
If I can just come in to expand, members have obviously a responsibility to make sure that when they receive reports and making their decisions, they're doing that based on all the information that they can have about that item. Full inquiry should be made, that you are presented the detail to enable you to make a sound decision on that. The introduction of the report indicates that this is an impact assessment of the proposals that are up for consideration. And I think the point that we're highlighting, this report isn't a complete impact assessment of the proposals that are being considered, being the 1B, 1E and B2. It is primarily an impact assessment on joining Nottingham and the impact on Broxton residents, rather than the proposals which always adjoins another council, and that clarification needs to be made so that you can establish that when you, because you can go to recommendation and agree to move this forward, but you must do so on the understanding that this report is not complete in that nature, and as long as you understand that when you go to move the recommendation. Thank you.
No. Just move straight to the vote.
Okay, so we're going to go straight to the vote. There's no request for a recorded vote on this one. So we need to see all those in favour of item 2 with the amended wording as I have said. Okay.
I think it's easier to count the ones that have.
Okay, so any against? 1, 2, 3,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's fine, yeah.
I think that's everybody. There's no abstentions unless anybody's any
There-
abstentions.
there were- yeah, there's no abstentions.
No abstentions. That's everybody. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it's a point, but just to clarify, that point that was just made about the fact that this refers to the merging of Broxton and Nottingham City Council, that is laid out in the report on page 13. So this isn't new information that is just being brought up in the meeting, that is in the report. So if everyone has read the papers in front of them, they should be aware of what you've just said.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bunn.
If I can come back, yeah, I do need to clarify, because it's really important that the decision that's been taken, the information in the report, I'm addressing the fact the introduction suggests that it's a full impact assessment of the options that are being considered, and predominantly, and as the chief executive whose report it is confirming that isn't a full and complete impact assessment of the options that you're considering. So that point has been.
Well, thank you. So that was carried. So I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you.